my next session, Pottery and Pottery Matters. My moderator today is Ms. Nilima Elliott. Nilima Elliott is the executive producer of Studio Exoris with 23 years of work experience across the field of advertising and filmmaking. Nilima has been responsible for Studio Exoris to be sustainable, profitable, and grow from an animation studio to one of the most well-known film production houses in India, producing advertising and short films, deploying design, be it animation or live action, or a mix of both. Nilima has been the producer of over 400 odd films created at a famous house of animation and Exoris over the years of her association with the two companies. Recipient of 2 national awards in the role of the producer for animated short films, Fisherwoman and Tuk Tuk in 2015 and Tokri 2017. Nilima has recently started Pottery and set up her studio that goes by the name I Got Fired. Heavily pun intended, since she is no longer a weekend potter as she set out to be. Yet she continues to work for Exoris, making a foray into print and merchandising, as Nilima considers this an extension of her design process that forms the cornerstone of the company philosophy and agenda. I have today with me Ms. Rekha Bajpai, Devyani Smith, Gary Hamilton, and Japneet Keith.
So, good day to all of you enthusiasts who are watching this session. And on behalf of the IAI Forum, an initiative of the Chapai Group, a forum created for the artists and by the artists, I welcome you all to a discussion on pottery and pottery matters with some very experienced and eminent artists who are on our panel today. Rekha Bajpai Agarwal, Devyani Smith, Sushma Anand, Yusuf Galvani, Japneet Keith, and Gary Hamilton. So without much ado, I'll begin with the introductions. Rekha Bajpai Agarwal hails from Bangalore and claims that her life is divided into BC and AC, before clay and after clay, which I think is very sweet. A full-time filmmaker, ceramics started out as a hobby and eventually became her primary focus when she set up her studio, Re for Clay, in 2000 with a small kiln and a kick wheel. Those days, with very little information and basic internet, ceramic techniques was a closely guarded secret, and learning was rather difficult. However, Rekha was determined to create a studio that would be a one-stop hub for aspiring potters and who could have an infrastructure to work out of, which is a reality today with her large studio in Gurgaon. Initially, she created functional ceramics and moved on to conceptual work with the themes of human spirit and women power, Shakti, and experimenting with glazes. Her work spreads over mask making, raku techniques, installations, murals, architectural and sculptural pieces. Rekha also teaches in her studio, conducts corporate workshops in schools, other educational organizations, and various different types of groups like senior citizens and underprivileged children. She started and was the editor of the Indian Ceramic Quarterly, funded by the Delhi Blue Pottery Trust for 10 years, and with 25 years of experience and a wide network of ceramic artists in India and the world over. Dilka has also made efforts to connect with the potters community on social media, which is a huge initiative and benefits learning and sharing. She has been curating exhibitions across India for private individuals, government museums, corporates like Taj, and a couple of exhibitions outside India. And she's been the only Indian to have been invited to participate in the Sevres Biennale in Paris and has been on the jury of an international exhibition as well. A very, very, very warm welcome to Rekha, and it's a privilege to have you on our panel today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Our next panelist, Devyani Smith, born in Ludhiana, grew up in different parts of the country, mostly in the mountain towns of the beautiful Himachal Pradesh. After working for the Indian television for about 8 years, she started learning pottery in 2008 from Hanif Galvani and later in 2009 at Sandeep Manjrekar's studio. She studied without any formal structure, learning from everyone who knew better and was willing to help. Mostly self-taught, she practiced and worked out of Hanif and Sandeep's studio until 2013. In 2014, she opened up her own studio in Goregaon, Mumbai, working with stone and clay, trying to strike a balance with both utilitarian and sculptural works. Most of her work finds its place on the table work that desires to be used with added beauty and acceptance. She likes her work to evoke ease in the form, colors, and use. Every piece is whole in itself, settles with equal calm or the environment, sometimes rugged yet serene, and work that is soothing to the eye and a quiet reminder of the respite and the strength of nature. Devyani teaches and works at a languid pace between smoke breaks and cups of tea, which are her own made, in the company of her feline residents of her studio, Sati and Savitri, often seen nestled in her bowls and platters. She has been regularly showing her work through galleries, her studio, and some niche lifestyle stores across India. Devyani, we are really, really happy to have you on board today, even though yours was one of the last confirmations, but really happy that you're here.
Thank you, Nirima. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Our next panelist, Sushma Anand, works out of a picturesque studio called Atmosphere, spread over a vast expanse over lush green paddy fields and coconut silhouettes of Kerala countryside, south of India. A graduate in fine arts who went on to further learn at the Golden Bridge Pottery and was tutored by the legendary rainmaker Deborah Smith and Amrita Dhawan. Sushma is deft with every form of pottery and pottery technique: hand built, wheel thrown, terracotta, stoneware, porcelain, electric, gas, wood, soda. The list is endless, and the experience and the experiments in each is an ongoing magical surgeon, as she puts it. A journey that cannot be expressed in words but can only be experienced through touch and feel. The past few years, she's been experimenting with transferring drawings and images onto clay, from painting to graffito, adding a new dimension to her work, and her inspiration is generally drawn from the rich and the vibrant cultural surrounding her. Sushma regularly participates in workshops, exhibitions alongside teaching students and pottery enthusiasts with oodles of patience. And even while she's bustling around in a studio on a typical day, it is no surprise to see her throwing, trimming, hand building, and painting all together with breaks that do not extend for over 2 to 3 minutes. And I have seen that for myself. And I really wonder how she manages, but she manages really, really well. Dear Sushma, it's really, really nice to have you amidst us today.
Thank you so much, Nirma.
And now I have the privilege of introducing Yusuf Galvani, a third generation traditional potter who has a studio and a large production unit in Dharavi, Mumbai. Yusufai is the second among the three famous porter brothers from Dharavi, Abbas and Hanif Galvani. So if you may recall, Devyani studied pottery from Hanif Galvani, who's Yusufai's younger brother. So yeah, we are a small world, a small community. And the Galvani brothers are an institute in themselves, and they've been instrumental for a lot of studio potters in India to begin their practice. And I'm happy to say I'm one such disciple who has had the privilege and the good fortune from learning from this powerhouse of talent. So thank you very, very much, Yusuf bhai. Yusuf bhai, bahut bahut shukriya. Yusuf is made of clay. He has grown up seeing his grandfather and father work with clay, and therefore it is no surprise that despite having no formal training, pottery is second nature to him. He often banters around his students who cautiously wash up their hands, usually me, saying, "Eat some clay, it is good for you, it will not kill you." आप बोलते रहते हो ना मेरे को कि आप थोड़ा clay खाओ, कुछ नहीं होएगा. इसलिए खाते रहिए. Yusuf Bhai's speed on the wheel while using minimum tools is admirable. He throws a batch of pots and plates to pretty accurate size and form with ease and deft of a seasoned potter, one that he is. He encourages his students to work with the same confidence, and he insists on getting the basics right before getting into the details of decoration. And Yusufai also feels very strongly about the plight of the traditional potters in his community, known as the Kumbarwada in Dharavi, and he has made many attempts to better their economic situation and working environment, appealing to the government and on an opportune occasion, even to the Dalai Lama about the matter. I heartily welcome Yusuf Bhai on the panel. Yusuf Bhai, हमको बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है कि आप हमारे साथ हैं आज यहाँ. Our next esteemed panelist is just Japneet Keith, a young feisty ceramist who travels between Chandigarh, India and Donsborough, Western Australia, while practicing and teaching out of her studio Red Mug, the name that clearly resonates her love for copper reds, rutile blue and shun glazes. Having graduated as an industrial designer specializing in ceramic and glass from the National Institute of Design, India, Japneet's passion lies in developing new glazes, their documentation and making them an open source for potters. This is a huge gap that she's trying to fill. So if you recall Rekha's journey of dabbling with pottery at a time when knowledge and glazed recipes and information was a closely guarded secret, I think Japneet's work is helping the community in a big way. Having mentored under Shantanu Jena and Ruby Junjunwala, she set up her own studio, and Redbug eventually saw a new phase in her journey at Commonage, a pottery gallery in Australia for practicing and reviving pottery. Japneet's experience extends to a wide repertoire of a curator, educationist, a designer, instilling efficient ceramic kilns and initiating residencies for fellow potters. A natural teacher, she shares the creativity with students both in India and Australia, and with exhibitions on home soil and outside the country, her work can be found at Habs Pottery in Australia. She's also an avid traveler, and nature is at the heart of Japneet's work. Welcome aboard, Japneet. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And last but definitely not the least, I have the pleasure to introduce Gary Hamilton, who hails from the UK and has been potting since 1994 after immigrating to Australia. Gary has been making beautiful pottery since 1974, when he commenced his career at the Cortlands, which helped him to learn the secrets of the family business, which have been passed down over the last 160 years in Australia. In 1979, Gary started work at the Ostware Pottery and made stoneware until September 1985, when he was asked to be a resident potter at the Old Cheese Factory at Bangalore. He has his own production facility at Capel, Western Australia, and over the next years, Gary developed his own style of work. Gary specializes in high temperature reduction firing cone 11 with copper reds, stoneware, and rutile glazes. His splash decoration techniques, along with glaze layering platters, are his signature style of work. Gary has been creating atmospheric glazed surfaces on pottery fired in gas reduction kiln for more than 30 years, and he is currently working as a potter in residence at Haps Winery, Common Age Pottery and Gallery in Dunsborough. Since January 2015, Gary has been conducting glaze development workshops and is also teaching pottery from Red Mug Studio in Chandigarh, India. Gary and Japneet have also successfully developed technology for more fuel-efficient gas kilns and installed them across the country. And the two kilns at NID and Kurukshetra and Vijayawada are testimony to their good work. This dynamic duo has joined us from the studio in Jonesboro today, and it is indeed wonderful to have you both with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's the end of a really, really long, drawn introduction. I'd like to open the discussion with our current situation being the lockdown and how it has been, how has it been, how positive it has been, if at all. Rekha, can't hear you.
So I'm one of the lucky ones who has a studio at home.
Yep.
But unfortunately for me, just before the lockdown, I had dumped everything which was in my studio in the central part,
Yep.
planning to renovate my studio.
Okay.
Decided to use the summer months to renovate and redo my studio.
Wow.
So everything was actually brought out of the stores and everything else and dumped in the main studio. So throughout the initial part of lockdown, I was not able to get into my studio and really do any work,
Oh.
unfortunately, though I had everything right there. So
Oh.
in the meanwhile, I have these potters groups on WhatsApp, and everybody was very upset about the fact that they couldn't get to their studios and couldn't use their clay, and
Okay.
they were wondering how to manage, without being able to access it.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to use this time to educate ourselves and get to know more about, ceramic problems and solutions for them, and also get to know each other a little better by making these presentations online on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
So first started with a lecture series,
Yeah.
and which ended with about 35 talks,
Okay.
presentations, and discussions, question answer sessions, very lively, and
Yeah.
a lot of learning during that.
Mm-hmm.
And then apart from that, also started a series of virtual studio visits where
Okay.
people who had access to their studios
Yeah.
made little mini videos of 5-6 minutes about their studios and the facilities they had, how they set it up and everything.
I see.
So it was very helpful. It's something which is very helpful for people who are setting up their studios, or who want tips about how to improve things in their studio. So I think that
Oh,
was
wow. Okay.
very
Oh,
good.
nice. So it seems like it was a time for you to reach out and help people who required that little bit of, and also to sort of restructure your own.
About getting to know each other also, and the learning which goes with it.
Yep.
So, all of us have been working together for years. We've been exhibiting our work together for years, but we never had that little time to go through our own ceramic journeys. We learned so much about each other during this process.
Oh, okay.
Plus, we were able to document all this,
I see.
which was very important, I think.
Oh,
So now we have a good, set of archives about contemporary Indian ceramics, which was never
okay.
there from the
Yeah.
beginning.
And I think that would be very valuable to the community eventually.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
wow, that's really nice to know. Gary, since this has been in your part of the world, you both have been in Australia since the lockdown and not in Chandigarh. I'm not so sure about that. So I would like to know, how has work been affected? Are you working more? Are you working less? Is it the same? Has anything changed drastically for you all in your work practice?
Me, as an Indian potter out of my own country, I landed here on the 9th of March.
Yep.
Funnily enough, the moment I landed here, the Indian Prime Minister said nobody's leaving the country. And the next very day, the Australian Prime Minister says nobody who's a resident and a citizen enters the country. So I just managed to get in on some land before the world shut down, and I managed to get out of the country before we were all asked to be where we were.
Okay.
So when I got in here, I had to isolate for good 14 days, and both Gary and me, because we came via Singapore. It's
Uh,
been a great
okay.
great and a strange experience when you look back at those months and days. And 14 days teach me quite a bit, right from the feeling of ye kya ho raha hai, what nonsense is this, right, to the feeling like it's okay, everybody wants to be a little more concerned about their health.
Yeah.
And eventually on my birthday, which was on 24th March, I was excited to get out because finishing my 14 days of quarantine, and I was heading to work, and the gallery tells me we are shutting down the business. And I thought, the people have called me to wish me a happy birthday, but they called me to say we are shutting, which was a shock. And from March, April, May, June, the business was shut down. So this gallery where we are sitting, so it was just Gary and me sitting and making
Okay.
pots with no visitors, no money.
Okay.
I think with Gary, it was a bit easier because the government has a little support system for their citizens.
Right.
But
Right.
for me, it was more like I am doomed. I'm really doomed.
I
Neither
don't
am I in India,
think
neither am I an
your
Australian.
situation sounds doomed at all. Your situation sounds very happy, relaxed. You're quarantined in a beautiful country. They call it the down
Yeah.
under, right? And you had all that time to yourself. So no, I don't hear complaints at all.
So we finally opened business on 8th June when the restrictions got lifted. And I must say, this is one thing that I have learned from the Australians. They have really supported the local community and support the local arts community
Right.
so well. They come in, even they might have $100 with them, but they'll spend 10 saying, and they will say the fact that we are supporting the local community.
Right. Right.
And I look after more of the business aspect here. I do make my pots, but I look after the business and trying to get a potters community going. That was the intention for 2020.
Okay.
But Gary is the one who's been making and churning pots. So I'll put you on to him and see what he says.
Sure.
Yeah, that first 14 days in the country, Jap stayed home. I went out to my isolation in my own studio in
Which
Capel.
sounds perfect to me.
It's about 45 minutes away from here. There's no people there anyway. It's way out in the wilds, and so I don't see people anyway. So isolation was just no problem for me at all. So I just kept making pots. So, but then when we were closed for quite some time. So, but I just kept working with that belief that it will open back up again and it will get going again. And it's a really good job I did that, because when it did open, the place just went crazy. Yeah, we're in a tourist destination, so it's a very, very beautiful part of the Southwest. If you look up Dunsborough on the internet, you will get a few glimpses of something that's probably most people will call it a paradise. So it's a great place to work. So yeah, once it opened back up,
We've not stopped.
we just haven't stopped. It's just been as many pots as I can make and get out of the kiln. They just keep going. Yeah,
it sounds really wonderful to me. I think it has the lockdown has only been very positive and nice for you.
It has, yes.
Yeah. So I'm happy because usually when I'm speaking with other designers from other fields, it's all about, oh, everything is so dull, it's so difficult, it is blah 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 blah. But it's nice to hear that it hasn't been that of a downhill for the two of you, and really happy to know that. यूसुफ भाई, गैरी और जपनीत ने मुझे अभी बोला कि वहाँ ऑस्ट्रेलिया में जो लोगों के पास जब पैसे भी नहीं होते थे डॉलर
$5,000
तो वो $10 तो पॉटरी खरीद के ऐसा सोचते हैं कि एटलीस्ट पॉटरी कम्युनिटी को कुछ फायदा हो रहा है, लाइक वो लोग कुछ सपोर्ट कर पा रहे हैं. तो ये अपने इंडिया में तो नहीं होता है ना.
नहीं होता है.
तो आपके लिए ये लॉकडाउन पीरियड कैसा रहा?
मेरा तो एकदम ही सडनली पूरा पॉटरी का स्टॉक पूरा बंद हो चुका था. मैं खुद अपना टेंशन में था कि क्या करूं, कोई किसी का ऑर्डर नहीं है, कोई किसी को पूछ ही नहीं रहा था कि बंदा क्या कर रहा है क्या नहीं कर रहा है. तो जनरली मुझे एक बंदा मिला था जो चाय बेचने वाला था. उसने बोला, यूसुफ भाई तुम मुझे चाय के कप बना दो, मैं लॉकडाउन में चाय बेचूंगा.
अच्छा.
तो मैंने बोला ठीक है भाई, मुझे दो, मेरे पास जितनी क्ले है उतनी मैं बना दो. वो एवरी डे मेरे पास 1000 पीस लेके जाता था. मैं उनको सिर्फ ₹2 में देता था एक ग्लास, ₹2.
ओके.
तो एवरी डे मुझे ₹2000 देके जाता था.
अच्छा.
तो मेरा उस हिसाब से मेरा रोटेशन चलता था.
अच्छा.
मैं उसको कभी 1000 देता था, कभी 2000, कभी 3000, हर 5-2-4 दिन में उसको मैं देता था. ऐसे तो बहुत पॉटर्स लोग के थे जिनकी हालत बहुत खराब हो जाती थी.
आप लकी थे कि आपको ये आदमी ने ऑर्डर्स देना बंद नहीं किया.
लॉकडाउन से अभी तक
Devyani, like if we look at our local situation, I think there were a few places like Dastakar and Seva and all who were trying to help local artisans and crafts people by advertising and trying to sell their wares. But I'm not sure how much of it was like that in the potters community. Unless you're aware and you can share some trivia over there, or the facts rather, not trivia.
So you asked me about Dastakar thing, no?
Yeah, like I have seen personally a lot of ads being put out saying support the local craftsmen and all. But was there any sort of an outreach like this, like a support for the potters and the potters community?
I don't, I don't know, and I did not even see anything that was like trying to promote pottery community. But like I think, for me personally, like I don't know, maybe people are spending more time at home, so they want like they just like want to redo the house, or they just want to like get more things for the house. They're eating at home, they're cooking more.
Yeah.
I don't know the reason really, but since June, I think I went back to the studio in June, thinking now I'll work in my own pace. Maybe I'll go 2-3 days in a week and just like work like a queen. But I think in a month's time, like I was like, okay, like there are orders, there are things to fill. Okay. And again, I'm back to being like, I think in July, I was back to not being able to take a break for like 15 days. After 15 days, when the body crashes, I take a break.
I see.
So like, yeah, but I don't know if there was any drive to, like support local businesses. But I do think like because the lives have changed. So people are spending more time at home. And when they're spending time at home, they are doing things with their hands. So I think it's an organic change that has come, maybe, like, I don't know. Yeah, but it's been good for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sushma, what is your view on the lockdown and how it probably has affected your work, the community, if not your work, the community?
Well, for me, for the past 5 years, I've been doing a dual kind of a job. I've been teaching in school as well.
Okay.
And last year in December, I had given in my resignation. So I would say it kind of happened in time.
Yeah.
With the lockdown, like school closed on March 10th, and my work, I had to work till 31st of March. So it was like I got my chutti way before time,
Wow.
from 10th of March onwards. And I've been meaning to get and just be into pottery full time.
Right, right.
So this was like a good opportunity, like, everything is locked down. I mean, there's lockdown all over.
Yeah.
And so I just dived right into work. And I was able to give that concentration out there. Again, I have my studio right behind my house. So, there's no issues about having to travel or anything like that. So
Yeah.
I like everything, or I think 100% of me was out there, and I was able to concentrate
Distancing
on
was
a
never
lot of
an issue
things.
for you. Yeah, yeah, correct.
It wasn't an issue for me.
It's interesting because all of you panelists here have the advantage of being really close to your workspaces, except for Devyani, I think, who could not travel for a little bit of while. So it's interesting to know that the lockdown has actually been more productive than.
Yeah, but the thing is, like you've seen, I've got a girl who works along with me in the pottery. Her name is Vasanta,
Yep.
and she comes from a local potters a community.
Right.
And for them, it was quite bad because, of course, there were no orders. And she sells her wear in the local market. And with this lockdown and everything shut, she couldn't go to the local market. She was at home. And a lot of them were quite depressed. So, every other day used to keep calling her up just to cheer her up. And the day they opened up and they said that, you can take a pass and travel, she was here.
You just ran.
And she just ran. And even now, every Wednesday, she goes to the local market and she says, I get money for just my bus to go there, to open my shop,
Right.
and to close it, to have a chai and get back home.
Wow.
But she still goes there every Wednesday because, she's trying to keep in touch with her customers. Maybe somebody will come, maybe somebody will purchase. But I think in total, a lot of people are a little tight with their spending, being very careful.
Of course.
I think they're checking what they buy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so even Wednesdays now she's here in the pottery.
Oh.
And,
okay. So moving on to a very personal question, which I'm going to pick all your minds and hearts about. What is it that drives you to get up in the morning and go to work? Gary, you've been potting for 30 years. Rekha, you've been in the field for almost 25 years, 25 years, if I remember correctly. Japneet, you've been like traveling between countries on work. यूसुफ भाई आप हर सुबह एकदम 9 बजे तैयार होकर आप स्टूडियो पहुंच जाते हो. Devyani has a little bit of commute, but she's there. Like she and her cats are up and alive every day of the studio. I've seen you work, Sushma. So what is it that makes you get out of bed every morning and say, hey, I need to get up and go and do what I'm doing? And for y'all to do it so consistently for so many years, what is it? And what is it that you really, really love about it? And what are probably, I don't know if you want to touch upon aspects which also make you feel that, this is like also not required, and it makes me uncomfortable, and maybe I could do it differently. But more to understand about what is it that drives you every day? Who would want to go first? Yes.
I think it's a sheer love of clay, been doing pottery since 97, 98.
Yeah.
And just love the medium, to be able to work with the hands. And if you tell me, like, go cook, it'll be totally different. It's like, oh, no, I can't do that. But then you tell me, go to the pottery, go to the studio, make something. Yes. And sometimes it's like 11 o'clock in the night. Sometimes it's 2 o'clock. Advantage of having it at home. But I think for me, I love experimenting. So something new comes up, constantly thinking about how you can do it, and trying out new ways of doing it. So I don't know if there's anything over the years. Yes, making clay has one laborious process, which you kind of simplified thanks to the pug mill. Um, so that has been heaven sent, having a pug mill. This is quite a laborious process of making clay and getting that ready and wedging it and all that. And that time actually save up a lot of time with pug mills. Yes, but I think it's the sheer love of the medium and of creation. I think you just feel so connected.
Wow, wow. Gary, Japni, do you all make your own clay, or is it sourced? Is it?
We're very spoiled. Our kaolin comes from New South Wales. It's probably the best kaolin anywhere on the planet. It's the oldest, and it's highly plastic, very strong, beautiful to throw. And we have there are a number of clay producers that have been producing clays for over 150 years.
Right.
For industry and for potters like us. And and we have a choice of maybe 40, 50 at least different clay bodies to choose from, different colors, different textures, and firing ranges.
And everything has a mineral, it's a mineral wealth here in WA. This part of the world is a mineral wealth. So right from a rutile blue to ilmenite to copper reds, everything is all local. Is the purest of material you can imagine. Wow. The second thing I've experienced here, because I have experienced both the continents, is अगर किसी को फोन करके बोला है, और मैं हिंदी में इसलिए बोलूंगी ताकि यूसुफ आई कैन हियर इट, अगर किसी को फोन करके बोला है कि रुटाइल चाहिए तो रुटाइल ही आएगा, अगर किसी को फोन करके बोला है फ्रिट चाहिए तो फ्रिट ही आएगा. I have experienced this in India, that I have asked for silica and silica की जगह mica आया है. तो ग्लेज तो ब्लू की जगह ब्राउन हो गया है, और फिर सोचते रहो कि ये ग्लेज का कलर क्यों नहीं आया है. तो अगर बैग्स में पीछे जाओ तो पता चलता है कि यार ये सिलिका नहीं आया है, माइका आया गया है. हाँ, और ये हर एक एवरीबडी कांट डू दिस, एवरीबडी कांट फिगर आउट कि मटेरियल गलत हो गया है. दिस इज वन एस्पेक्ट ऑफ आर्टिस्ट, ह्यूमंस, बिजनेस पीपल दैट आई रियली value here. Okay. You are getting the right material. They are really spoiled. जो इंडिया में है और जो यहाँ पर है, मतलब जमीन आसमान का फर्क है. They are really spoiled. इन लोगों के पास सब कुछ है, हमारे पास तो कुछ भी नहीं है.
लेकिन वहाँ पे
I eat, sleep and breathe it. From I enjoy it to the absolute max. I love what I do. Always have since I was a 16-year-old.
Right.
So seeing that pot first made up close by the people that taught me and their family, it was magic, and that magic's still there. I can make that magic now, and there's always, the great thing about it is that there's just, it never stops. There is always something new to learn. So your mind is active, and it's just a thrill to open the kiln every time you open the kiln.
Right.
To see what new whether it's a new glaze or a new shape or form or whatever, or a new product for use. But and then fortunately in our situation here, we're right in front of the buying public. People come here. It's a winery, so people come to taste wines, but they also, I have over the years, I've had a very big following of people coming to purchase pottery. And they know that in the Southwest, they can come down here and there's probably 4 or 5 quite really good potters that are supported quite well by the general public. So we're very, very fortunate being potters, I think.
Saying that, I do feel like I have a studio back in India which is shut down, and of course I can't get back at the moment when I want to.
Yep.
So I've made truce with the fact that I can't get back. So I I just have to stay calm where I am. There are no flights going back there. In fact, there's no letter going back, even if I want to send a postcard. But I have a lady who looks after my studio, Kusam. And luckily, I got a student who just said, I didn't want to tell Kusam कि कुसुम अब तुम काम पे मत आओ क्योंकि कोई आ तो रहा नहीं है क्योंकि कुसुम के 1000 पे तो वैल्यू करते हैं ना. So I got a few students who said we like to use the studio and we like to work in the studio. So that little bit of money is running in the economy in my little business.
Okay, okay.
When it comes to clay, I love to work with it because I think it's a very, very honest medium. I always tell my students, say, look, if you touch it, it is a material that will pick up your fingerprints. So if you think it can't read you, it will definitely read you because it will just tell you who you are. As an industrial designer, I've worked with many, many materials, and I think clay is just fantastic. You know, it just gives you the reflection of who you are right there and then. But the challenge I do face is like, especially in the years I started, I used to have friends who were going to Taiwan, Japan, Hong Kong for all these industrial design and Frankfurt for all these venues where the company was paying. And I used to feel, मेरे को तो कोई भी नहीं बुलाता यार मेरी तो कोई वैल्यू ही नहीं है. But over the years, you know, they have actually told me, Japneet, what you've done is initial years of lots of work, but you have had the courage to stand on your feet, you know, and we have never had that courage to stand on our own. So I think it's everybody's own little progression, and clay is addictive, and I'm happy to be living in the world of ceramics actually now. Initially, I used to think, इस साल अगर दिसंबर तक पैसे नहीं बने ना तो नौकरी पकड़ लेनी है कहीं ना कहीं तो ceramic industry में या glass industry में. But I think, and I do remember those days very well, telling myself कि बस इस दिसंबर के बाद तो नौकरी पकड़ ही लेनी है कहीं पे. But it's been great, and I think I will die as a ceramist now. I don't see myself changing anymore. So, and I'm very fortunate, like I say, I'm very, very fortunate in many aspects of my learning and where I've been and people who've mentored me. So yeah, it's
lovely.
been great.
Lovely to know.
Yeah.
Devyani and Rekha both have a filmmaking and a television background. So to both of you, like, share that common background, and for you all to leave that crazy world of films and filmmaking and to mess with clay, that must have been like a huge decision and consideration of, you know, changing gears and so drastically. So what do you have to say about that?
Should I go?
Yep.
Okay, for me it was not so much of a heartbreaking transition because both are creative fields. So whether it was filmmaking or whether going to clay, which honestly, the first time I touched clay, I fell in love, and that love is still going very strong. So I think it is more of a compulsion to do this. It's not something which I can help. You know, I don't have the choice anymore of saying ki I don't want to be in clay anymore.
Yeah.
It's just become my way of life, and I literally eat, drink, sleep, dream clay. So whether I have my hands in clay or not, I'm always doing something or working on something to do with clay. So various aspects of it. So it is not a choice anymore. So if you ask me, like, why do you choose to do it? It's not a choice.
It's not a choice.
It's a compulsion now. And I'm so grateful, so grateful to God and to one gentleman called Sardar Gurcharan Singh, who's known as the father of studio pottery in India.
Right.
I'm so grateful to him for bringing this, whole studio pottery angle of clay to India. There was already traditional, there's already traditional pottery. There was already industrial pottery going on. So this whole aspect of expressing yourself through clay is something which he brought in.
Right.
And for that, I'm going to be eternally grateful, I think.
Lovely.
And as Japneet says, yes, I'm going to die a potter.
So 3 people who want to die as potters. Devyani.
I want to be also. I want to be in a pot also. You know, when I die, I want my ashes to be
You want
used
me
to
to
make
make
a
a
glaze.
glaze from your ashes, Rekha?
Yeah, I'll send you some. I'll send you some. Yeah, I want to
He's
be in a pot.
definitely going to surpass all of us. Trust me.
Yeah.
Devyani, I would love to hear your shift from filmmaking to pottery, and like, are you happy where you are?
I actually also, like Rekha, I don't think like I was heartbroken or anything. I had left television way before I started learning pottery.
Okay.
So it was like
Transition for you.
yeah, like I was like even when I was working for television, I used to wonder why am I doing this, because I was not good in it. I was not interested in it.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I was just so yeah, and like, and I'm hearing everybody else. You can hear me, right?
A little on and off.
Okay, there is some. Okay. Yeah. So, what was I saying? Yeah, and pottery also. I think like, when I'm listening to everybody else, I feel like I'm cheating on clay, but I was like, it was not like, love at first. I touched clay and I discovered myself. No, I don't have a story like that.
Yeah.
But I've been doing it, and this is the longest affair that I've ever had with any material.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been like I started learning in 2008, and I had no intentions of being a professional potter.
Right, right.
And it's 2020, and I have my own studio and I work, so there must be something. But I like, I think more than romance, I think it's a way of life. Like I don't question why do I do it. I don't even want to question why I do it. I do it. I love it. I want to do it tomorrow as well. Day after tomorrow, I don't know. I really don't know if I want to die as a potter or in a pot or like because of the pot. That I don't know. But like tomorrow, I want to do it, and probably day after also. Yeah, yeah.
So nobody here is taking your order for the dying pot that you want to be left in.
Then
So
I have two people.
Which one?
So Yusuf भाई, अगर आप pottery नहीं करते तो आप क्या करते?
He's on mute.
He's on mute.
Yusuf भाई.
हाँ बोलिए.
हाँ यूसुफ भाई, अगर आप pottery नहीं करते तो आप क्या करते?
मैं सीमेंट बनता था, शीट में जाता था.
अच्छा, वाह, बढ़िया. घूमने.
हाँ, यस. लेकिन पॉटर्स में हूँ, बहुत अच्छा है. मैंने पॉटरी में आने के लिए मुझे तो बहुत पहले तो नहीं लग रहा था कि मैं पॉटर्स बनूं. अच्छा. फिर कुदरती जब जैसे जैसे अब्बास भाई ने मुझे प्रेशर दिया, पॉटरी सीखो, पॉटरी सीखो. तो पहले से ही कामचोर तो था. इंटरेस्ट नहीं था. फिर जैसे अब्बास भाई ने प्रेशर डाला, मैंने काम सीखते गया और मुझे अच्छा लगने लगा कि पॉटरी करना चाहिए. यही फील्ड फिर पकड़ना बेटर समझा. और मेरी लाइफ में पॉटर्स लोग तो काफी देखे. मैंने देवयानी को मेरे स्टूडियो पे, हमारे स्टूडियो पे सबसे ज्यादा वक्त गुजारने का मैंने इस लेडीज को देखा है. कि वो रात में 9 बजे 10 बजे तक अकेली पॉटरी करने में मैंने उनको देखा है. ऐसे कम पॉटर्स लोग को मैंने देखा है, कोई इतना डीप अंदर जाना तो देवयानी में था. अच्छा.
ओह नाइस. यूसुफ भाई, आपको लगता है कि जिस तरह से पॉटरी कुमारवाड़ा में होता है, उस तरह से कुमारवाड़ा के पॉटर्स पॉटरी कर पाएंगे 10 साल आगे?
मैं एक बात बताता हूँ. पहले तो फर्स्ट ये कि कहीं पे भी मैं जाता हूँ, अगर मैं किसी को हमारे रिलीजन में बोलता हूँ मैं पॉटर्स हूँ, तो उनका मुंह आड़ा टेढ़ा हो जाता था. अरे यार, ये तो पॉटर्स है. तो मुझे एक फील हुआ, यार क्यों ये पॉटरीज काम हमारा जो इतना टॉप लेवल पे क्यों ना जाए. इस वजह से मैंने अपनी क्लास, हनीफ भाई ने क्लास खोली ताकि पॉटर्स लोग बढ़े और बढ़े. यानी कम शॉर्ट नहीं होने चाहिए, बढ़ना चाहिए. मेरा एक कहना है. तो हमारे भी पॉटर्स कमेटी में जो छोड़ रहे हैं, मैंने कितना सबको समझाया है क्या पॉटरी फील्ड में आओ. सिरामिक सीखो, अपना खुद का जरूरी नहीं कि कोई जॉब मिलना ही जरूरी है, अपने काम को भी पेशेंस करो कि कुछ उसको डिजाइन करके डेवलप करो ताकि मार्केट में आप अपना भी
राइट
आर्टिकल्स दे सकते हो। ऐसा कुछ नहीं कि पॉटर्स के जमाने में पहले वो बना लिया, गुडलक बना लिया, गमला बना लिया, उसको भी मोटिवेट करके आप अपना मार्केट में लॉन्च करो, उसको ग्लेजिंग करो, अच्छी डिजाइन के डेवलप करो ताकि आप अपने भी पॉटर्स को, मैं काफी समझाता हूँ लेकिन हमारे पॉटर्स नहीं समझते हैं।
अच्छा,
फिर मैं भी थक चुका हूँ क्योंकि जब हमने गैस स्किल डेवलप की थी तो बहुत से पॉटर्स बोलते हैं कि आर्टिकल्स नहीं फायर हो रहे।
अरे
संदीप सर, अब्बास, काफी सारे, लेकिन अभी ये छोड़ रहे हैं। लेकिन मैं तो इनको एक ही बोलता हूँ कि पॉटरी लाइन मत छोड़ा करो क्योंकि आज
आप ऐसा बोल रहे हैं और यहाँ जपनीत और गैरी सिरेमिक गैस स्किन्स डेवलप कर रहे हैं जो आपका भी बहुत एफिशिएंट है, 5 घंटे में 1200 डिग्रीज तक फायरिंग होता है, ये सब सुन रहे हैं। रेखा जी इतना काम कर रही है लोकल पॉटर्स और कम्युनिटी के साथ, उनको सोशल मीडिया पे आने के लिए। सुषमा के यहाँ वो लोकल ट्राइबल पीपल हैं जो असिस्ट करते हैं पॉटरी में, जिनका जिन्होंने पॉटरी एक शुरू से देखा है। तो मेरा कहने का मतलब है कि लोगों को पॉटरी करनी है और इंडिया में स्टूडियो पॉटरी और पॉटर्स बढ़ रहे हैं।
यस,
पर आपके कुमारवाड़े में कुछ अलग प्रॉब्लम है, करेक्ट?
कम हो रहे क्योंकि जो पॉटर्स कमेटी हमारे वहाँ पे है, वो फुल फैमिली एक ही पॉटर्स लोग के साथ में जुड़ जाते हैं। वो बिजनेस लेवल के हिसाब से वो लोग पॉटरी नहीं करते हैं, बस सिर्फ पैसा और लक्ष्य और बिजनेस को किस तरह से डेवलप करना है वो सोचेंगे। जब मेहनत करते हैं एकदम गधे के माफिक सोचता है यार मेरे को कुछ मिला नहीं पैसा, लेकिन अपने आर्टिकल्स को कोई चेंज करना ही नहीं चाहता है कि मैं अपने आर्टिकल्स को चेंज करके अच्छे पैसे कमाऊं।
आप नए डिजाइन बनाते हैं क्या हर साल?
हाँ, हर साल नई डिजाइन होती है। मेरी दिवाली के दिए में है और मैं हर सोचता हूँ कोई बड़ी चीज करो। मेरा एक ड्रीम है मेरा और अब्बास भाई का कि छोटा नहीं बड़ा करना है। तो ज्यादा करके पॉटर्स लोग में मुझे खुशी है कि बड़ी लिफ्ट होनी चाहिए। यानी बड़ी बड़ी चीजें बनाना, छोटी चीजें भी तो बनाता हूँ काफी सारे छोटे छोटे मिनिएचर वास, लेकिन ज्यादा करके ऑलमोस्ट सोचता हूँ कि कोई बड़े पीस को ग्लेज किया जाए। जैसे काफी सारे फॉरेन कंट्रीज में देखता हूँ कि उनके पॉट्स अच्छे खासे बनते हैं। मुझे बहुत खुशी होती है कि ऐसे पॉटर्स लोग को मिलना, उनकी टेक्निक्स देखना, काम उनसे किस तरह से हो रहा है, ये सीखने का बहुत मेरे को शौक है।
पर वो I think, Rekha, if correct me if I'm wrong, but that exchange, that interaction within the pottery community is a lot more now than what it used to be, I would say, even 5 years ago, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what would be that one thing you would tell aspiring potters today, and what is that? What is that one thought you'd like to leave with them in order for pottery to be sustainable, both as a profession, and I mean, we can touch upon pottery being sustainable for the environment a little later, but what is that one thought that you would want to leave with potters?
Never give up.
Never give up.
Never give up.
Sushma, Devyani, Gary.
I would say if there is something that I would want to say to somebody who's just starting, is to slow down.
Slow down.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I think I would say the same thing as Devyani, because everybody's in such a rush. There's so much out there, and sometimes a lot of people lose sight of, how things are to be made, and they need to look at the work and see what they're doing.
Wonderful. So I think we are pretty much at the end of our time window. But just on a parting note, I would just like each one to touch upon one thing that you really, I know I've asked this before, but one thing that you really love about the process. Gary, Japneet, I would really like you to talk about your experiments with making efficient kins for the community. If you can begin with that, and then we will move to the other speakers.
Yeah, well, doing workshops around India, and especially with high temperature glazes, I found that most people's kilns were flawed in their design.
Yeah.
And the first thing I had to look at was actually how am I going to get this kiln up to temperature? Now, in some cases, it was a very difficult thing. It's just throwing fuel at it, you know, like, and for long hours. But I think Sandeep was the first person that where we did a workshop at Sandeep's studio.
Right.
He was already producing kilns. Now, he was very surprised of the fact that just a few small alterations to the design could halve the time in firing and half the amount of fuel. So he was most impressed with that. But and it's, I think with India, a lot what I noticed was that once one thing is copied, it's copied regardless. You know, of whether it works or whether it doesn't work. It's
copied.
It's just copied.
I see.
And if you're copying a bad design,
right,
then yeah, there's no going forward. You know, like. But yeah, so it was really just for that need. You know, I mean, there's a few big advantages in designing something that works really well and efficiently. And that is that one, your time as a potter, you're better off spending time actually making pieces, especially if you're making for a living.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of hours making pots. I spend, you know, 10, 12 hours a day doing what I do, and to keep up with that demand. Now, if I'm spending, you know, 14 hours firing a kiln, and then I'm spending a lot of money in fuel, I'm behind the 8 ball to start with. You know, it's but if you can cut those hours down that you're firing, and you can cut the amount of fuel use down, it's that money comes back. That's in your pocket instead of you're cutting that cost down. Plus the fact that the environment, you know, like our kilns. Well, I mean, that little kiln that I was producing. We fired down as low as 4.5 hours to 1320.
Right.
And with somewhere between 15 and 17 kilos of gas, not even a gas bottle. You know,
there are two things that made that difference actually. One is the brick thickness, the wall thickness, and second, the kind of bricks we are using.
Okay.
The bricks are imported from Germany. They are really meant to be doing what they are supposed to do, as in increase the temperature rather than absorb the heat and keep sucking the heat. I'd taken Gary to Abbas Bhai's in Dharavi, and I'd also taken Gary to Patparganj, this place, one of the pottery community.
Yeah.
And surprisingly enough, in one of the communities, they were using 17 LPG cylinders, 19 kilos each, for just a 900-degree firing. And this shocked and amused him, like, really?
Yeah.
From there on in, we realized there's a need in the market that if we can make it economical, it's great.
Yeah.
One of our students, Nandita, was actually the first ones to ask Gary, will you do a kiln? Which he had a design, and Gary before that had done a kiln for me. So the kiln I have in India in my studio in Chandigarh, you know, you can dismantle it. You can dismantle the roof, wall, ceiling, everything, and take it to another place. And the reason I got that done was because I had moved from a farm to my residence studio, and I thought, well, if tomorrow I go to a farmhouse, I should be able to move again. So as a potter and as an industrial designer, I think it's about need, defining the market, and acting on that at there and then, you know, rather than just trying to find a way around it. If there's a problem, then you find a solution, right?
Like I have heard really crazy stories from Sushma about how she had to haul her kiln to her beautiful studio in the countryside with a crane. She had to hire a crane to haul that kiln into her studio and have it up and running. And I think she also had a lot of hiccups setting it up. And I think along the way, she has developed, she's made her own changes. Devyani has built her clay in her, her cane in her own studio. I don't know about you, Rekha. Do you also build your own kiln?
Yeah, pretty much.
I see. I know Yusuf Bhai, for a fact, he has recently built a really large gas kiln. Yusuf Bhai, आप वो gas kiln में आप शुरू कर दिया है क्या काम?
सिरामिक ने नहीं किया, बिस्किट फायर करते हैं.
Okay.
The difference I feel is, Nilma, is, in India, I am one of the very few people who managed to go to university to learn, right? And when it comes to skill and pottery, like even my dadi at the moment will say, "Kya karti hai tu? To bartan hi banati hai." Bhande banati hai, pande banati hai tu, to kudi saadi pande banati hai. Whereas I smile and say, "Hanji." But do you see the mental psyche we have for a craft? We are just not, as a community and cluster, I'm not demeaning anybody, but it is in our system to think in a different manner. We're not thinking that it is a skill. It is after years that you develop it.
Right.
Wherein there are lots of good things that we as a country and community strive for, but this is something where it is like pande banandi hai.
So you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in our country, India is one of the few countries left in the world where pottery is still a living tradition.
Right.
We have Yusuf Bhai right here.
Yeah.
This has come down from centuries. And India has a tradition of unglazed pottery.
Yeah.
So, we have this for thousands of years, more than 5,000 years.
Yeah.
So this has always been there in every village, every town has its potters community.
Sure.
So that is the most commonly available pottery, which has always been there. We've seen it from childhood onwards.
And unfortunately, it's not respected as a profession.
Because it is always available, because it is available cheap.
Yeah.
You see? So that is a mindset which is slowly going with education.
Right. Yeah,
I think it was a community requirement, having pots.
Exactly.
Every village, every community thing. So I think they labeled them, they belong to a caste itself, You have the Dubiwalas and then you have the Kumbhars.
Right.
So that was a requirement. And also the fact that women don't do pottery, they don't allow them to do pottery.
Yeah, that's
another thing.
I'm sure you, Rekha, must have faced this when you started,
I had the traditional potters asking me, कि आप लोग तो पढ़े लिखे हो, आप मिट्टी में काम क्यों करते हैं? So I said, आप मिट्टी में हो, ये इतनी बड़ी बात है कि मुझे भी थोड़ा मौका चाहिए.
My feeling is I've worked with a few of the traditional potters.
Yeah.
And their skills are truly amazing. I mean, they're equal to anybody I've ever seen.
Right.
And I think if they were all to get together,
yes,
whether it's online or whatever it else is, and they all at the very minimum multiplied their prices by 5
I would say
overnight, right? And just said, well, we're not selling anything unless you pay this.
Yeah.
And people will buy it.
Right. I totally agree, because this is a conversation I've had with Yusuf Bhai on many occasions. Yusuf Bhai, आप बोलते हैं ना कि हमारे pottery community में किसी को 2 रुपए से 2 रुपए का जो बेचते हैं वो 20 साल के बाद भी 2 रुपए का ही बेचते हैं.
You go from 2 rupees to $1.
You go from 2 to 2. That's it. So that's the reality. That's what's happening today.
That's the reason why all these communities, they don't want to go ahead with pottery. The prices don't increase. People don't want to also pay for the pottery.
Well, then they don't own it. They won't get it. But it won't be very long before they will buy it again.
That's true, but by then, you don't know how many of them will survive to then.
Exactly.
Because already people are moving out of this, and.
But then, while traditional pottery is on a decline, there are students who are graduating every year from institutes. There are studio potters. That the whole shift from traditional pottery to studio pottery And people were calling themselves as designers even before ceramic artists and potters. It's an interesting shift, I think. But I feel strongly about the traditional potters and that community diminishing very, very rapidly in India, which is not the happiest situation.
Actually, one solution for that, which I found, was to keep them earning through pottery, but giving them enough time to do their traditional work as well, is through teaching.
Through teaching, yeah.
So yeah, so I've been conducting workshops to train traditional potters to
Right.
be able to take part in interviews in schools, be able to convince the principal to set up a pottery class over there, a
Yeah.
pottery studio,
Mm.
and to be able to make a curriculum, make a syllabus to teach kids of various ages.
Yeah, yeah,
So that is something which will also give them enough spare time. They get an income, steady income,
yeah.
and enough spare time to work on their traditional pottery as well.
Sure,
So
sure.
that's one way of going about it.
So it's a little difficult actually getting them to shift from what they're used to into something new.
Right.
I had Vasanta's nephew come across to my pottery, like wanted to get him into, doing a ceramic also.
Mm.
And he traditionally makes these pots to collect,
Toddy.
toddy,
Mhm.
toddy, yeah.
Ah, okay.
And he lasted all of one day.
Ah,
Ah.
He didn't come
No,
back
actually,
the next day.
I'm talking about more about the urban potters who are
Mm.
no longer doing traditional pottery. They don't want to do
Mm.
traditional
yeah,
pottery. They
yeah,
want to go into other professions.
yeah.
So teaching is a respectable profession.
Hmm.
It's giving them good money,
Hmm.
and they're still in clay.
Right, right.
So that's why it's a win-win situation, because it's a respected,
Yeah.
particularly because it's a very respected profession.
I mean, Yusuf Bhai messes with clay all day, and I think a good part of his day is also spent teaching.
Mhm.
यूसुफ भाई आपके यहाँ बहुत स्टूडेंट्स आते हैं ना पढ़ने के लिए हाँ so it's interesting. So while he continues like working in the traditional method, there are lots of aspiring potters who come to him to learn. So I think our country is in an interesting transition phase where at one end of the parabola it is like when you talk to traditional potters, they speak about how they are an outcast and nobody respects their work and they won't want their children to
Exactly.
actually pursue that career anymore. And then there's this whole wave of this young potters who students and studio potters who want to make that like as a very definite career, and it's more than pottery for them. Yeah.
Yes.
Great. So any last thoughts, anything y'all would like to share, talk about, reach out to the community before we say bye bye? Because I'm sure Akshita is like this session was meant to be an hour and it's already been an hour and a half or probably more.
I think the community is changing at a very, very fast, rapid pace. The internet is being a great help. People like Rekha who are connecting people all around the world, people like Shushma who developed so much new things, and people like Devyani who are trying to make the most of where they are, and the traditional potters like Yusuf Bhai. I think it's in a great change,
Yeah.
when I work here, I'm I still belong to it. People tell me where are you from, and when I say India, and they look up to us with a lot of love and passion and say, oh wow, and say all those things. I think it's just a matter of time where we could look at our crafts with a lot of respect,
Right.
and it is a change where people are beginning to
Yeah.
evolve through, that change for our craft, that change through
Yeah.
this really challenging year,
Hmm.
asking what is right, what is wrong. Of
Yeah.
course, there's a big question here. People, pick up products and ask, is this locally produced?
Hmm.
But I think people are evolving, and
Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of another few years wherein
Yeah.
people try to connect the dots in a very global manner
Yeah.
and evolve, you know.
And I think this lockdown also has made people think about uh,
Mhm.
plastic and, how the environment is and what kind of damage it is doing to the earth. So, a lot of people are looking at ceramics with new eyes and saying, yes, that's the move.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
work with something which is reusable and
I
see and
think
beautiful.
Yes.
one thing that we've got here is that our buying public, our market,
Hmm.
is educated to the fact that there is a lot of work goes into making pottery,
Right.
and there's a lot of years of skill and training go into making that pottery.
Yeah.
So here it's a very valued commodity.
Hmm.
People would much rather use something that's handmade than go
Right.
to Kmart and buy something for $2 or $1 that
Right.
was mass produced in China.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
they
Yeah.
appreciate those skills. So I think
Right.
it's, as your buying market becomes a little more educated towards what actually goes into it,
Yeah.
then prices may change more.
Yep.
It's getting that into people's heads, though.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think in our country the challenge would be more for the traditional potters to stop thinking that this is something that they cannot sustain their livelihood with. I think that shift will be like a real shift, according to me.
Yeah, well, what's his name?
Yes,
Hakim.
Hakim.
Hakim. Hakim changed. Hakim is one person that I had spent some time with, and he was a very, very good potter and a traditional potter.
Right.
But he has actually changed his focus a little bit, and by applying glazes to that work, it sells for much, much more without very much more labor.
Okay.
So he's adjusted his product to suit the market.
Right.
He's still a traditional potter,
Right.
and a very clever one, but he's been willing to change.
Right.
So the traditional potters have to be
Have
willing
to
to change
change.
to meet the demands of the buying
Absolutely.
public.
Mind public, true. I agree because even during my many conversations with Yusuf guys, the thing of, I want to continue doing pottery, but people won't buy, people will not. But the thing is, the traditional potters really want to make the diyas and the diyas, the lamps and
Scenario, Nilima. We did some terracotta planters. हमने यहाँ पे terracotta मिट्टी के घड़े बनाए, ठीक है, और गमले बनाए. किसी ने नहीं खरीदे. Nobody bought them. But the moment we will glaze them, they will sell.
I see.
It's a traditional mindset all around the globe. ऐसा नहीं है कि सिर्फ इंडिया में ही है. टेराकोटा की वैल्यू लोगों ने नहीं डाली तो ना कंज्यूमर ने डाली.
Okay.
Correct.
So it's a issue everywhere.
Everywhere.
But things are cyclical.
Sorry, Rekha.
No. I was just saying things are cyclical, so it will come back into style.
Yeah, it will.
Naked clay.
It's about education. The moment we tell people कि terracotta के pot में your plant would stay more better, it will survive more. It's not from China. It's the property of terracotta. You must use it.
Yeah.
They evolve, but it takes a lot of time. It's a process.
Most important is sustainable. The ceramics is every